God has a lesson for you in every difficulty. So let me ask you this. When bad things happen to you, do you thank God for it? So like, let's say someone cheats you and costs you money, like a decently substantial amount of money, right? Are you grateful about that? People are like averting their eyes. Yeah, you're not. Why not? Okay, that's fair. Thank you for your honesty. Okay, so it's unjust. You don't want to thank God for any injustice. Okay, fair enough. That makes good sense. Right? What about what happened to you? Not for the fact this happened, but for what's happened to you, or what you're getting out of it. There's something to thank God for there. Because to a lot of people, it does sound really silly. Like, why would you thank God for someone committing an injustice against you and like inconveniencing you, right, and harming you even? We thank God for the good things that happen to us, not the bad things, right? But 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says, "Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you." Ephesians 5:20, "Give thanks always and for everything to the God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ." So, someone lies to you, wastes your time, hurts you, costs you money. Why and how do you give thanks for that? Now, those of you who study Boethius should have an answer to this. I know some of you are in the thick of that actually right now, so this is a little bit of a spoiler. But Boethius, can anyone tell me about it really quickly? Just what he did, who he was?
He basically, so Boethius was thrown into prison and unjustly, and Lady Philosophy came and kind of debated.
That's what happens in his book, for sure. Yes, that's how he's working that out. So exactly. So Boethius, in addition to being the guy who preserves a whole bunch of ancient, he translates a bunch of Greek philosophy into Latin, and thereby kind of advanced classical education. But besides that, he's also like a politician of sorts who's committed, at the end, it's like the burying of the Roman Empire, who's trying to reform it and like clean it up and make the government better. And the people who make governments corrupt don't like that. So they falsely accuse Boethius. He gets thrown into jail and eventually dies while he's there. And while he's there, he writes this book, Consolation of Philosophy, right? And he wrestles with this question in the Consolation of Philosophy, which is, why do bad things happen to good people like me, and good things seem to happen to bad people like my oppressors who are still in power and are going to probably die in their beds? And what's Boethius' answer to that, or like by way of Lady Philosophy? So keep going. Sure, go ahead.
Basically, even though it's not always visible, being a good and virtuous person always benefits you in the end, because you can't be a fully happy person if you're not like doing what humans.
Sure. That sounds like nice. Let's put this more starkly so it sounds more offensive, because this is what he says. Why do bad things happen to good people? They don't. Why do good things happen to bad people? They don't. Now that immediately sounds wrong, right? That should elicit some reaction from you. But here's what he means, and this is what Sarah's getting at, right? Is getting $1 billion suddenly a good thing or a bad thing? Boom. For someone who has trouble with their appetites, let's say, is it going to be good for them to suddenly have $1 billion tax-free? No, it's going to be horrible for them. They're going to immediately, first of all, they're going to probably have lost it within a year, and where they're being squalor. And it's probably not like on wise investments, right? They probably are going to squander it. But even if they, don't lose it all immediately and end up on the streets, right? It's going to be terrible for their souls, right? They're going to be indulging in probably stuff that's going to harm their bodies, but certainly harm their souls. It's going to be terrible for them. Right? But let's say St. Francis of Assisi suddenly adds $1 billion tax-free. Well, that's going to be incredible, both for everyone around him and for his own soul. Right? You get all that money and you donate it to others. You pay off other people's debts. You buy them everything that they sort of need. It will also be gone within a few months, right? Or at least most of it will be. But your soul will be so much richer. You'll be so much better because you practice that virtue. Conversely, is, and I think you see where this is going right now, losing your home, good or bad. Yeah, if you're really attached to living in comfort and you think that this world's all there is and you want to be as comfortable as you can while you're in this world, pretty bad. Right? But if you're somebody who's trying to get closer to God, who knows that in the eternal life, your soul isn't gonna have a house, right? That's gonna promote detachment for you. That's gonna be something you help you realize, okay, I need to let go of things. I need to to trust in God. I need to know that everything comes from His hand, because one day I'm gonna be dead and I'm gonna lose that house anyways. And that's going to help you grow in virtue and deepen in holiness. And for you, that's going to be a good thing. Now, that doesn't mean these aren't objective evils. Not moral evils, but they're objective evils. It doesn't mean you should be cheerful about it, right? Job has all sorts of things happen to him that, he didn't earn, right? Says he was, he never, he didn't sin, and yet he loses his family, loses his wealth, loses his health as well. And it never says he's happy, like he's crying out to God and begging for an answer and weeping. Like, he's not cheerful, but he doesn't sin. He still trusts in Him. And he ends up having this incredible encounter with God in the whirlwind because of all this experience. And the book of James says we should imitate the patience of Job in all sufferings. Okay. So it's not to say that, like, if there's an injustice, you shouldn't seek for justice for the sake of, the justice of the world, or that you need to feel good about it. But there's a reason why you can give thanks for it, and why for you it can still be, in fact, should still be a good thing. Because it's something that came from the hand of God. God didn't let this happen. God wasn't distracted when this happened. It didn't happen on His watch. God allowed whatever happened to you to happen for a reason, which means there must be some good for it that you can give thanks for. So this can sound a bit strong, maybe even a little harsh, because some of us have endured pretty bad things, haven't we? Really, really bad things. So let me take a small, tiny example that's harmless, so we don't start the day off in a totally miserable note like we had to last. I lost my car keys last weekend. I had them on Saturday. I was in my wife's car. We went a few places, and at the end of the day, I couldn't find them. So I retraced my steps on the Saturday, couldn't find them. So we were at the bank, and the banks are closed on Sundays, right? So I'm like, okay, Monday morning, I'll just take the day off work, the morning off work. I'll go to the bank. The bank will be open then. I'll find the keys, and I'll drive to work for the afternoon, right? So Monday morning is extremely inconvenient for me because I have to drop my son off at preschool, and it's Monday, so I have to also drop off his jacket and his bedding and his lunch. And I have to rent an Uber and strap the car seat into it, and then strap my son into the car seat, and then dismantle all of that, and then leave the car seat at the preschool, find a spot for that, and then get an Uber home, and then wait until the bank opens, and the bank's so close I don't want to get an Uber, so I walk, and it's really cold. Anyways, keys aren't there. So there you go. So then I call the dealership to be like, okay, I have a 2011 Toyota RAV4. Can you get me a key for that? No, there are no parts for those in Edmonton. We'll have to special order it for you. Minimum it gets here is a week. Maximum is a month. It'll cost you $1,000. So I asked ChatGPT to tell me who's got the best reviews for car keys on Edmonton. Guy comes out, and God bless the guy. It cost me less than $1,000, and it's done within a couple of hours. Although by the time he actually gets there, it's the afternoon, so I'm not going to work now. So, anyways, that being said, the guy does not have any car keys with the buttons on them. So now I have to manually open my car by putting the key in the lock like it's 1973, right? And then manually hit the lock on there, right? So I am really sure someone stole my keys because there's not unless I fell in the snow somewhere. Because I've retraced the steps and there's not a place they could be hiding. I don't think. So I think somebody found them and stole. I think it was in Capilano too, and I think that they must have assumed, there must be a car nearby that I can steal because they didn't realize I was in my wife's car. So I think my keys were stolen. We'll see if someone turned them into the police and I get a report about that. We'll see. But I'm thinking someone probably stole my keys, horribly inconvenienced me and my son, stressed me out, and my wife, well, she handled it like a champ, but stressed her out, made it difficult, cost me money, cost me time at work. Cost you guys, as I'm sure some of you have noticed, right? Because things weren't uploaded as fast as they could have been. So, the very strong temptation for me is to be filled with righteous anger at whoever did this. And it's a pretty easy anger to justify, I'd say. But I have to give thanks. So what can I give thanks for here? And there's a few things, but I'm going to just focus on one, because some of them are more, I guess, just relate to me, let's say. I don't want to not take too long. But here's one. I had big plans for my first day back at work after Christmas. I was going to get marketing done and upload modules and finish this reflection. Like I was going to polish that off, so that wouldn't, I was going to think about it, I was going to get some errands done at lunchtime. I was going to start the month off right. It's going to be a big month, isn't it? And all it took to derail all those plans was I lost a little piece of metal. And that was all out the window. And that's probably because I wasn't listening to the Bible. The book of James says, chapter 4, now listen, those of you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this city or that city, we'll carry out business and make money. You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. I was taking for granted that my plans were going to get all worked out. And yeah, it's a small thing. We don't always think, I'm going to pray to God about, what I'm going to do on Monday. But look at that. I always wanted to be in charge and micromanage everything. And God had to kind of remind me, no, it's all ultimately up to me. Even in little things, don't forget to offer things up to me and get me involved. And maybe consult with me first. Right? And I now need to remember, and I've been reminded to just kind of consult with God before, let's say, I develop a lesson plan or write an email. Just a quick, things that I know how to do those. I don't need to ask God about that. Right? And so hopefully I can get out of this experience to trust in God more, which I know trusting in God more will work things out for me better in the long run. So I can legitimately be frustrated. It's not a sin to be frustrated. I can legitimately pray for justice. That if someone stole my keys, that they are brought to justice for their own sake. But on some level, I also have to say, thank God someone stole my car keys. Or at the very least that I lost them. Because God had a lesson for me in this difficulty. Now that's a pretty mild example. Like this chapter deals with infertility. Some of us have dealt with infertility or with miscarriages. I delve into that. That's a little heavy to start the day off with. It's perfectly right to be sad about that. But also God must have some kind of lesson there because he loves us and he's good. And that's where we turn to today's reading. So, in this chapter of Genesis, we have a foil. Now, English people, foil. What's a foil? Yes, sir.
When two people are given the same circumstances but choose different ones.
Correct. Yes, and that kind of teaches us a lesson about how we should respond to things and moral character. We have a foil here in Genesis. And those of you who were here last year might have thought this sounds kind of familiar. It sure does. Because previously in Genesis, Abraham goes into Egypt. Now, Abraham's wife Sarah is apparently very, very beautiful. So Abraham's afraid people will kill him so they can take her. Right? So when he goes into Egypt, he claims Sarah is his sister so that he won't be killed. Sure enough, Pharaoh takes Sarah into his harem and gives Abraham a whole bunch of goods. Because, his brother-in-law now, right, wants to get on his good side. Gives him cattle and slaves. And then God afflicts Pharaoh with a whole bunch of plagues. He afflicts his household with a whole bunch of plagues. Something really similar happens to it. Abraham lies and says, this is my sister. Right? The king, he goes into a town called Gerar, a city of the Philistines, says, this is my sister, because he assumes the locals have no fear of God, and they're just going to do whatever they want. So the king Abimelech, sure enough, sees this beautiful woman, takes her into his harem. So God strikes the whole house with infertility. Pharaoh and Abimelech, very similar, right? Kings who take Sarah and their harems and their houses get punished for it. But they react very differently when they find out the truth. Pharaoh angrily tells Abraham, why did you do this to me? Doesn't wait for an answer, though, and just kicks him and the family out of Egypt. Very understandable. I can't say I don't sympathize with the guy in some level, right? His family is being afflicted with plagues because of something that he did, because someone lied to him. He didn't know he was taking someone else's wife. As soon as he finds out, he gets rid of her, right? So maybe he felt righteously indignant. He was like, hey, you cheated me. Why would you do that? Get out of here. Right? And he doesn't even kill Abraham. He just gets rid of him. That's generous, right? But Abimelech responds very differently. Because God appears to him in a dream, kind of imagine, right? And warns him, don't touch Sarah. She's another man's wife. That's why your house has infertility right now. And then he adds, Abraham is a prophet. And if he prays to you, if you ask him to pray for you to me, then that curse will be lifted. So, someone lied to Abimelech, and now his family is suffering because of it. But he reacts very differently from Pharaoh. Similarly, but differently. He's a foil to Pharaoh. So, first of all, he also summons Abraham and demands to know, why did you lie to me? Why have you done this to me? What did I ever do to you? It's perfectly valid to have some indignation and to want justice. Difference is he actually waits for an answer. Pharaoh doesn't. He actually does hear out what Abraham has to say. And Abraham explains, he says, I assumed that there was no fear of God here, and that if you saw my wife, you would kill me and take her. Now, remember, in the previous chapters, Abraham pleaded with God to have mercy on Sodom and Gomorrah, but they were so evil and wicked that God destroyed them completely with fire. And sure enough, when the two visitors came in, the first thing that the locals did was try to take them and use them. So you can kind of, it doesn't justify it, but you can kind of see where Abraham's coming from. And assuming, okay, the people around here are just not trustworthy, right? I gotta take things into my own hands to try to protect my own life, right? Doesn't justify it, but you see where he's coming from. And then he also says, well, actually, she is my half-sister, kind of, like she's like a relative of mine closely. So like, you know, from a certain point of view, she actually is my sister. So this is in Catholic theology, what's called mental reservation, where you say something that's like literally true, but it's like really misleading. Still a sin, by the way. Church made a ruling on that. Sorry, that mental reservation is still qualifies as lying and is sin. So again, in my situation, if someone stole my car keys, sinful though it is, they probably had some reason for it. Doesn't justify it, but maybe that can help me forgive them. Like our Lord prays, Father, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. Easy for me to make assumptions about that person. They're probably scummy. They have no fear of God. They must have had bad parents who didn't send them to Chesterton Academy and teach them what when they grew up, right? But this story should be a warning against that, right? Because Abraham makes assumptions about the people of Gerar, that they have no fear of God. But actually, Abimelech comes out looking better than Abraham does in this story. You know, more reverent towards God. God even tells Abimelech, I know that you did this with a clear conscience, but that's why I've kept you from sinning. The early church fathers actually saw Abimelech as representing the pagans who didn't know about Jesus but still had a fear of God, you know, like Socrates. Because Abimelech means, like Ab, as we know, means father, like Abba for Abraham. You know? And Malek means king, right? So it's those who reverence God as father and as king. That's what Abimelech represents. Right? So he doesn't know about the true God yet, but he still has a fear of God, which a lot of people who aren't Christians do, are in that situation. Now, Pharaoh gave Abraham a whole bunch of goods when he thought that Sarah was his sister. As soon as he finds out that she's not, he kicks them out. The opposite happens here. When Abimelech finds out that Abraham is actually Sarah's husband and that he's a prophet of God and God's made him wander around, at that point, Abimelech gives him a whole bunch of goods, a whole bunch of slaves. Gives him 1,000 shekels of silver and says, wherever you want to live in my land, go ahead and do it. Now, why do you think Abimelech would be so generous to Abraham after he found that out? This is the guy who cheated him, and because he believed this guy's lies, his family has gotten cursed. Because he's still a prophet of God. Yeah. I think that's exactly what it is. Because he knows that this guy still has a connection to God. Maybe he's just being calculated, like, oh, I need this guy to pray for me, so I really want to get this good graces. So, you know, maybe that's part of it. But we also know that he fears God, and there's a prophet of God in front of him, someone who can connect him to God. And even though he's legitimately says, you know, Abraham, you were bad to me, you shouldn't have done this, he rebukes him, that's correctly. He still knows it's important to be in a relationship with Abraham. Can I suggest this might be a little bit like our relationship with the church sometimes? Sometimes people in church, even as we know, sadly, priests sometimes, can really fumble the ball. And we have a right to be indignant, call those people to account, right, to establish justice. But the church is still where we find Christ. And we should still be in relationship to it. I also think I think God's teaching Abimelech a lesson. Because one of the themes we have in Genesis is that sin results when we see things we want and we just take them. So here's a few examples, just really quickly, because we're closing out here. There's Adam and Eve see the fruit and take it. Lamech sees women that he wants and takes them. It's the first polygamy in the Bible, right? The Nephilim, right before the flood, they see women they want and they just take them. Lot sees the good land that he wants and he just takes it, which is why he ends up the way he ends up. Okay? Sarah wants Abraham to have a child and she can't seem to do it, so she takes Hagar and gives her to him. The people of Sodom see the angelic visitors and they want them, so they take them. Lot's daughters want children, so they take their father, right? It's a theme throughout Genesis that we've seen so far. Abimelech also sees a beautiful woman and just takes her. That led to trouble. So what's the opposite of that? Giving. Right? Sacrifice. Abel offers a good sacrifice to God. So does Noah. So does Abraham. They're always sacrificing. Melchizedek, after this battle, right, where he rescues Lot, Melchizedek gives Abraham bread and wine, right? Abraham gives a meal to his angelic visitors. So does Lot, right? And that's what Abimelech does, right? He gives things up. He gives up land and slaves and cattle and silver. And most importantly, Sarah herself, he restores to Abraham. And I think God had a lesson for him in this difficulty. Don't just take whatever you want. And just like in lessons, you have content and you have some kind of activity to learn that content. Don't take whatever you want. Here's your activity. You got to give some stuff away. And Abimelech learned that lesson. Can we? Now, I'll just say one other final thing. We know that God plays the long game, right? So we talked before about Lot. Horrible story, right, of the two daughters getting him drunk so they can have children. But one of those children is Moab. And the Moabites are a nation that goes to war with Israel, but one of those Moabites is named Ruth. She marries an Israelite, becomes an ancestor of David, becomes an ancestor of Jesus. Brings about our salvation. This horrible story, God brings about good for our salvation. Same thing here. Gerar is pagan at first, but through this messy, ugly incident, right, Abraham plants the seed of faith there. And in fact, thousands of years later, at the Council of Chalcedon in 451, where they declared definitively in the Creed that Jesus is both fully God and fully man, one of the bishops who's there, upholding this truth, is named Marcion. And he's the bishop of somewhere called Gerar. Abraham brings the true faith to Gerar in a messy way, but it bears incredible fruit many, many centuries later. God's very patient. We should be too. We should be patient. We should be forgiving. We should be giving thanks in all things, even when frustrating or evil things happen to us, even when we're cheated, even when someone lies to us, even when someone costs us. We shouldn't follow our flesh and be like Pharaoh. There's something to be said for turning the other cheek in love, like Abimelech. Listening closely to Christ the teacher, because he has a lesson for us in every difficulty.